But think of your own life. Think of your own life. How it,
Right.
it's kind of crazy. Who we are is so random. It's created so randomly. Like
Right.
my grandparents on my dad's side, the my grandmother, who I really never met really, but I know the history of, she was born deaf, right?
Hmm.
And so she was a sign language teacher. My grandfather was deafened in World War II and was in a VA hospital, and she was his sign language teacher.
Hmm.
So both of my grandparents are deaf, and my natural father grew up in a deaf household, so he signed. And it's crazy. Like they met because the guy got deafened in the war. You don't think of stuff like that?
Oh, that's pure. Again, it's romantic. It's great how these things happen, and we don't really, obviously now, we kind of, or the person doesn't really see how it all came together. But then when you think about it, when you have time to really sit down and think about it, it's just like, wow, if they weren't there at this precise moment, or this situation wasn't happening, I wouldn't be here. And I always try to tell my niece and nephew that whenever my sister and brother-in-law's wedding anniversary comes around. And I tell my parents this all the time too. But I feel like it's important for them to know that if they hadn't gotten together, you wouldn't be here. So you should thank them,
You should be grateful.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody, to Casting for Two, the podcast, as always, hosted by me, Chris. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 403. That's 403. Again, with the message of the podcast, wear a damn mask. The numbers are going up, and if you're not wearing a mask, then please stay indoors. Be respectful towards other people around you, which is also the second rule of this podcast. And yeah, so please just do that. If not for you, for a loved one, why not? All right, it's that easy. My guest today is a phenomenal person. He has not only, been in bands and a musician and written music and all this good stuff, but he's also turned his life into saving others as well, as far as being a counselor and helping people with their addictions. And truly an amazing man. Bob Forrest is on the podcast from Thelonious Monster, and they recently released a new album that came out on Election Day. And a lot of this episode was literally recorded the day after Election Day, when we didn't know who won the presidential race, and you'll hear us talk about it in the episode. But this episode is really long for a Casting for Two episode, and to be honest, I loved every minute of it. Bob is such an extraordinary person, and I'm excited for you all to listen. So you know what? In order for that to happen, I need to shut up. I need to shut my mouth, and let's let this episode ride, all right? So everybody sit back, relax, and Bob, take it away.
Hey, Chris. Sorry I'm a little late. Trying to figure out this new version of Zoom.
It's perfectly fine. I was really looking forward to our chat today, simply because I needed to get my mind off current stuff right now. So,
Oh yeah, everybody's got that going on.
oh my god! Yeah, and I'd be lying if I didn't say I had, like a window on my computer that was just dedicated to just numbers and me looking at him and refreshing them every so often.
Yeah, I'm watching. Where do you live at?
I live in Texas.
Oh, okay. Well, that was so shocking along the Mexican border that I got all kinds of opinions about it.
Yeah.
But Trump triggers some sort of machismo
Yeah.
in certain male kind of populations. It's really interesting.
It was one of those things that, I've been talking about it with my friends and all that, leading up to the election, and he does bring out this monster that lives in people that are just uh, have grounded traditional roots, I should say, in what made the country, and he's just a vessel for all that hatred to come out, and it's just okay, all right.
Well, the hatred. So, what is your podcast about? I'm so sorry. What is it? Politics? Is it music? Is it both?
Yeah, it's entertainment.
Entertainment? Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
let's
we can talk
because
about politics.
I got because I got a lot of opinions about this. Are we taping? You want to do it?
Oh yeah, we've been going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I couldn't believe what our country had become long before Donald Trump. I mean, me and Andrew Breitbart used to talk about it. Andrew Breitbart's a smart guy. He was from LA. I've known him since the late 80s, early 90s. He said, if America doesn't wake up, they're going to end up with someone like Donald Trump as president. That's all I'm trying to do is wake people up.
Yeah.
And so there's so much that is argued to be subjective about America, right?
Right.
So, but it's not really subjective. It is based in fact. Like, the powers that be that control this country, it's just entrenched. And Trump came along and said, hey, I think I can muck up this entrenchment. And he could, I don't know, he's like a savant. He's like a political savant. You can't underestimate him. I mean, I think when I saw, here's what I told all my friends, because my family been in politics in California since I was a kid. Like, my dad was friends with Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan and George Murphy. Do you know that there was another, if you want to think about how weird Trump is, he's a reality TV star, bullshit artist, president. There was an actor before Reagan who was governor of California in the 50s or the early 60s. His name was George Murphy. He was one of my dad's drinking buddies. And he was just an actor, just like Reagan. Like, this is a tradition in America that these kind of empty vessels become president. I don't know how, you know what I mean? And so it's more of an anomaly if and I would say W is kind of an empty vessel too, but his dad certainly wasn't. His dad was a wise man. Clinton's one of the smartest guys ever been in politics. I mean, so you have this back and forth, this vacillation back and forth between these empty vessel candidates and these super smart, like, wise people. Right. I would say Jimmy Carter was wise. I would say Herbert Walker was wise. I would say Clinton was wise. And then you have these empty vessels of Reagan and now Trump and W. It's just like a strange back and forth. And America seems to go through these cycles. Nothing makes sense. But what does make sense is trauma. We have the highest rate of suicide in the world. We have the highest rate of drug addiction in the world. We have the highest rate of incest in the world. So we are a trauma nation.
Yeah.
That's why there's no doubt about it. 20% of this population is addicted to mind-altering substances. 20%, whether it's alcohol, prescription drugs, illicit drugs. 20%, 1 out of 5 people you meet in your daily life is high.
Yeah.
Right. So then you add the the food, one in three Americans is obese.
Mm-hmm.
You start to see how sick this society is, emotionally sick. We're expressing it with our drug addiction, with our eating, with our sexual abuse. I mean, I just saw a commercial last night for the sexual abuse cases against the Boy Scouts and the Catholic Church and this and that. We are a very sick nation, and I think Trump is making us look at how sick our nation is. And liberals and elites don't like it because we like to think, oh, everybody's happy because I'm happy. I got a bunch of money. I'm happy. And it just shatters everything you think you know about America.
Mm-hmm.
I know I felt that last night. I was sure. Here's what I thought. Florida's going to be too close to call, and there's going to be a blue wave of Biden through Georgia, through North Carolina. I mean, I thought it was just going to be, and I was reminded, America is not what you think it is.
Right. It's, I think back to 2016, sitting there and just thinking, what's going on here? What, this guy, what? And so I had that mentality last night. And then, being on social media, everybody was just, how is this a close election? And
I can
how,
tell you some of the reasons, but Trump is not there. Like, he has that cult like devotees that go see him and are willing to die for him, like the
right.
700 people that have died from going to his rallies.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a small percentage of it. There's a silent majority of Trumpers who don't want to be told how to use language by college students.
Right.
Right. So that's what you call political correctness. I don't mind political correctness. I do mind Maoist China practiced in America.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Political correctness is, hey, it hurts people's feelings if you use the word retarded. Okay, I won't use it.
Yeah.
Right. But telling me I'm a bad person if I use it, that's Maoist China.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the attacking that has been going on the last 5, 6, 7 years of I can only have my own experience and then what I watch and what I take in and what I've seen and what I know, right? So I was a very radical person in the 80s, very radical.
Yeah.
I was arrested for solicitation to kill the president. I threw red paint on Ronald Reagan's limousine in an ACT UP kind of protest.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get arrested because we responded. We ran through the hills and the bushes, and then it wasn't even his limousine. So it was in LA in Century City. I don't know if you know LA very well, but it was Ronald Reagan's favorite hotel. And he was purposely allowing our gay brothers to die. And I'm not gay, I'm bi, but I was a part of the ACT UP movement. And some friends of mine were all getting drunk and high and said, hey, we're going to go throw red paint on Ronald Reagan's limousine to like it's blood on his hands on his limo. And I said, oh, I'll go, because I was kind of drunk. And we sat in the bushes and we waited for fucking hours. And we were like, walking down the street to go hang out at the supermarket because it was kind of just going on and on. There was about 6 of us. And then he was leaving like at 10:15 at night out of the Century City Hotel. And we all stood there and there was this weird on-ramp to get on Olympic Boulevard. And we threw paint we had these buckets of red paint and we threw it on the limos. And it turned out, and they couldn't stop, and then we ran the other way. They couldn't get out of where they were, the Secret Service and all that. It was really dangerous, like 1986 or something. Yeah. It was really dangerous. So then, I'm part of ACT UP. I'm arrested for solicitation to kill the president, George Herbert Walker Bush. Me and the Chili Peppers and Jane's Addiction and Fishbone funded a terrorist organization called the Sea Shepherds. They're now a very mainstream organization, but in the 80s, they were considered a terrorist organization. And their thing was to sink whaling ships and interfere in Japanese whaling. We bought a bunch of snowmobiles and paint, and they spray painted all the baby seals across the Canadian tundra so that their pelts were worth nothing. Ironically, the trappers who, when you're a kid, I was probably 24, I thought, well, they're horrible people for killing these baby seals. What I didn't
Right.
realize is for hundreds of years they've been killing baby seals. That's how they make their living. That's just a thing. I'm from Los Angeles, born in Hollywood, California. They're born in eastern Alaska and western Canada in the tundra. And who am I to say? So what they did, we spray painted all these baby seals or got paint all over these baby seals, and they just killed them anyways to send a message to us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that makes you think like, holy shit, we went to all this trouble. We thought we were smarter than them. And in fact, they did what they were going to do anyways.
Right.
And they're not going to have money for their families to eat this winter or this,
Right.
you know what I mean? So as a part of all this radicalness, fast forward, I go through drug addiction, I get sober, I get a job, I work in a hospital, I have kids, I have a family, I can't get old, and all the, but I still interact with Gen Zers every day because I work in rehab centers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And millennials the last 10, 15 years. And I start to get attacked by them for being old or not understanding or you're rich or all this kind of negativity that comes towards white males of a certain age, I guess, white privilege or whatever, which I totally get. I get it. But coming from white privileged rich kids is kind of a little bit much for me.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just had several different really interesting interactions with millennials in particular, where this one girl, I kind of, when they started all the letters that you had to say like 10 years ago, you couldn't just say gay and lesbian. You had to say gay and lesbian and BGTQ or whatever.
Correct.
And if you didn't say it right, you were a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And they would correct you as to what it meant. And I said, well, I'm just old and whatever. It's gay and lesbian to me. And for all my life, if you just said, hey, I'm old and I support gay rights and whatever, and I'm just old and I say gay and lesbian, I hope that's okay with you. This girl just shouted me down and said I was homophobic and all that kind of rhetoric that comes off the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm a drug counselor in a rehab and I'm a good guy, but yet her needing to be right and it to be what AOC thinks and this anger that came at me, I was like, whoa, let me sit down and talk with you about what I've done in my life to support gay and lesbian rights. Mm-hmm. You've done nothing but go on Facebook. I risk going to federal prison. Who are you to condemn me?
Right.
And I think Trumpism is a lot of that, is like a backlash against this kind of militant attacking, because both sides are hateful. I'll tell you that. Right, both sides are hateful. Yeah. And unless you address why Trump triggers you so much, like I addressed it, I just don't like to see my brothers and sisters duped by con men.
Right.
And they are my brothers and sisters, whether I got a lot of Trumper friends. They're my brothers and sisters. If I ask them to help me move or help me with my RV or whatever, they're there for me. We're not as different as our politic makes us want to seem. Mm-hmm. But I noticed that the last 3 or 4 years, when you bring up Trump, they get very defensive. I mean, I had a rehab center in Temecula, so like a inland kind of rural community here in Southern California. And as I'd go to work, I only went out there 2 days a week, and I'd pull in, there are more and more Trump stickers in 2016 on the cars in the parking lot of the rehab. And so I'm sitting up, and I'm seen as this, Hollywood guy that's coming out there or whatever. I know I try to offset that by being cool and being humble and I'm not some asshole from LA. And I'd been doing that for like a year. So they did like me. And when I was sitting there and there was a couple of the gals that I knew had the Trump stickers and Trump supporters. And I said, I know we don't want to talk politics at work, but I just want to point out one thing. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe I'm totally overstepping here. But if Trump gets elected and does what he says he's going to do, which is revoke Obamacare and the Parity Act, we won't be able to have this rehab. Do you guys
Right.
understand that? The Parity Act is the only reason we can have this rehab. And so if and I understand you can vote for whoever you want, whatever. I just think you should be informed that if Trump wins and he revokes Obamacare and the pre-existing condition, we'll have to close this up. And by the way, guys, I'll just go back to LA,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But you guys won't have these good paying jobs. And they're one of the girls, really cool girls, I liked her a lot, very competent. She said, I don't give a fuck. I want him to go to Washington and fuck that shit up.
Mm. Yeah.
When you got that kind of irrational, when you're facing that kind of irrational thought, like, I'll lose my good paying job, one of the only $20 an hour unskilled labor jobs in Temecula that's enabled me to buy a new car and have a nice apartment and buy, go and have a comfortable life. I'm willing to sacrifice that because I want some stranger I know nothing about to go fuck something up I don't understand.
Right.
That's Trumpism in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's mainly about, I just in general just not being informed on the issue, just being told, well, this is bad, and nobody saying, well, why? It's just, well, do the research, or why is it good for us? Why is it bad for us? That's what my brain always goes to. It's like, we hate this. Well, why do we
Well,
hate
let's
this?
think about that for a second because my wife said something, I worked really hard. Here's another thing about America.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked really hard. I worked 80 hours a week for 7 years without a vacation to get myself into the position I'm in, which is pretty comfortable, and I'm pretty grateful. But it was hard work that got me here.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Somehow this position I'm in now, I'm a bad person for being in this position. And Kamala Harris just said it 3 days ago. She said, everybody should have the same opportunity and we all should get to the same place. Mm-hmm. Think about that statement. She walked it back. But think about that statement. And she didn't make it by mistake. She's saying that to that 20% of the left base of the Democratic Party. Everybody gets to end up in the same place. No, they don't. Mm-hmm. Never do they. Because let me tell you about her. She lives in a $10 million Brentwood mansion. Mm-hmm. So do we all get to live in $10 million Brentwood mansions? That's just illogical.
Right.
It's just as illogical as the Temecula girl who will lose her job to have somebody go fuck something up she doesn't understand. It's just as illogical for a woman who lives in a $10 million house to say we're all going to have everything that we want. Mm-hmm. No, that's not true.
Right.
And material wealth, by the way, is not all it's cracked up to be. If you look at who's killing themselves, white middle-class males between the ages of 36 and 54, suicide is the leading cause of death of that population. Mm-hmm. So if having opportunity and having a comfortable lifestyle is the ultimate in existence, why is this percentage of this population that has that killing themselves? Because there's more to life. There's right. Community, there's caring about people, there's trying to help, there's family, there's love, there's so many more important things than material wealth or all this kind of stuff. Now I understand not having money is fucked. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. And right. We should be doing everything we can to raise people up. Right?
Right.
And give people opportunity. But, I deal with a lot of different people in a lot of different parts of the world because of parts of society because of rehab. It's kind of a universal problem, right? It affects all classes, all races, all age brackets, all economic brackets. So on an average day in a rehab, you could have the most elite kind of economic person and just a working class kid, right? In the same group, suffering the same addiction problems. It's kind of why I like it so much. It is the universal problem. right?
Right. Well, and then it also kind of depends on, well, not kind of, it does depend on the person themselves, whether they want to go after that, good job, or they want to go through school, they want to be clean. It just, you know,
Well, school, nobody
eh,
should go through school. School is a waste of time. Now, this is where I become radical. School is the biggest bullshit hustle in America.
uh-huh.
It's bullshit. I'm talking about primary education in America.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches mediocrity and compliance. Then it switches in the more upper levels of education to teach you fantasy and everyone's equal and everybody's going to get a trophy and everything's great.
Right.
Education in America should just be torn down and rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my kids going to school. I'm so glad we got this Zoom shit. Like, fuck it, don't go. I told my 34-year-old in 1997, I wrote a song, the schools don't teach you nothing you'll ever need to know. Why even go? Why even try? I truly believe the American education system is mostly to blame for the situation our society is in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't teach you shit. Teaches you how to memorize shit.
Right.
And
right.
then as soon as you've memorized it and passed the test, you forget it. And you don't even understand the fundamentals of what you were supposed to learn. And so if that's what K-8 is, all the rest of it is just built on this faulty foundation. And it's just bullshit. That's why you go and get a journalism degree for $200,000. There's no journalism jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Every college in America has an overly priced, expensive journalism program. Why? Because it plays into a fantasy of you're gonna be this, all around the world, international traveling journalist. You're going to be selling fucking stories to Politico for a penny a letter, a penny a word,
mm-hmm.
with no health care and no nothing. Right?
Right. My biggest thing is, somebody who, because, I went through traditional school, but as soon as I got into community college to save money to go to a major university, it was just, why am I taking these classes I don't really have any interest in, and where my career path that I wanted to go down, like, why do I need that training or that class? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I ended up just dropping out because it wasn't where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, and there were other options of, me going through. So that's exactly what I did. So.
Where'd you end up? Because I can say I went to school. I was, kind of obsessed with literature. So I was like an English major and philosophy and all, like, because my dad had died and left me money. As long as I went to college or school, I would get my life, I'd get my apartment and all that paid for. That's when I met Anthony and Flea. They didn't have any place to live, and my dad's trust paid for me to have an apartment, so they moved into my apartment. So watch that career path. I'm just getting high, going to college forever because I get money to have an apartment and have a car and whatever, as long as I go to college. It didn't even note in the trust that I had to pass or have a certain grade point average. I just had to be enrolled. so I went to college for like 7 years. I don't think I completed like 1 year total of college. So I meet Anthony and Flea. They don't have a place to live. They move in. And then the Chili Peppers started. And then I worked for them like as a roadie or whatever. And then they kept saying, you should be a singer. Like, you should play music. And so then I formed Thelonious Monster. And that led to a career in music that then led to drug addiction, that then led to becoming a drug counselor, then led to working in a hospital, then led to having my own rehab centers. Mm-hmm. Because I let Anthony and Flea move into my house. Right? It's true. There's a thing out here called the Upright Citizens Brigade. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, UCB,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, Amy Poehler's thing. So
Yeah.
when I was on Celebrity Rehab and I was kind of a semi-celebrity, they had me do that, and they're so amazing. That right, the guys who founded it, they're so funny, they're so great.
Yeah.
And by the way, right before they go out there to improvise for 2 hours, they smoke weed. How they do that, I have no idea. These guys, and they were smoking weed in the dressing room. They have this thing where somebody of notoriety comes out and tells their life story, and then the lights go out, and then the improvers improvise different scenes and what they think of that person's life. So it was so great. So I walk out, I tell my story, like whatever, for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Then the lights go out, and these guys start immediately improvising a kid who's in a high school guidance counselor meeting for career in college. And the kid says, the counselor says, so what is your plan? Where are you planning on going to college and higher education? And the kid says, no, I'm thinking of getting on drugs. And the whole audience is cracked up. And then obviously it just unfolds what I just told you. They picked it up just from me telling my story. Yeah, I'm kind of scared of heroin right now, but ultimately that's what I want to get on because that's what everybody has to get on. Right. But I think I'm going to start with marijuana and maybe some cocaine. And the high school guidance counselor was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, I want to be a drug counselor and have my own rehab. So the way that I do that, at first I have to get on drugs. then I have to get off them, and then I have to start working, helping other people get off them, and then eventually I'll have my own rehab. It was just so funny. My life story told by the Upright Citizens Brigade, and it was so funny and crazy. You could never plan my life. And most of my friends you couldn't plan. I have a friend that started out working as a box boy at his dad's supermarket. He ended up owning the supermarket. Oh, okay. Like you've got to keep trying and keep opening your mind. But if you think you just go point A leads to point B leads to point C leads to happiness, you're crazy. That's why so many people are killing themselves. It doesn't work like that. Life does not work like that. Right. I always tell this story. I was in a band that hated me, which is a lot of the Thelonious Monster that we just made a record. I was pretty insufferable, really. Looking back on it, because I was what's called a critic's darling. I don't know if you know what that is nowadays. I don't think there is such a thing, but like I was being praised as this new Bob Dylan by everybody, by the New York Times, by Village Voice, by LA Times, and Rolling Stone, and it goes to your head, like you're just a dumb, fucked up musician who's barely even been making records for 5 years, and they start telling you you're this, you're that, you're the greatest thing ever. I would write a song that was pretty self-explanatory and pretty simple and not, and they would make it into this profound thing. And they would find meaning in the lyrics that I had no idea that that's what the lyrics were about. You know what I mean? Like you give a rock critic a pretty good record like Replacements or REM, they'll make it into some bigger thing than it actually is. So I was kind of hard to be around, and I always wanted things my way, and that kind of no brown M&Ms. I was kind of that. Like I was a punk rock version of Van Halen or something. And so the band didn't really like being around me. So I kind of traveled by myself. And I like to think of myself like a lot of musicians do, as just like a normal person, which, I've seen a lot of musicians that I know that are in big bands. They don't like to, because it's hard to be a musician that's so successful, and everywhere you go, people treat you differently. And it's really a mind fuck kind of for Eddie Vedder or Kurt Cobain or Anthony and Flea. It's kind of a mind fuck. You live in this weird world, right? Mm-hmm. And so you kind of overcompensate and try to act like you're a normal person. So one of my coping mechanisms for that is I would always take like public transportation to our concert. I don't know why I came up with it. I could be in San Francisco or New York and whatever, and I'd take the subway to the gig, right? Or I was taking the bus one time in San Francisco to play in the Haight Park there at the end of the Haight. And I took the bus down Haight Street. And I was sitting on the the storefront side of the bus. Now I could have sat on the other side looking across the street. You know what I mean? It was just
Right.
chance that I sat on the right-hand side of the bus, right. And as I was, and it was going down really slow because Hate's really crowded. And this beautiful girl was walking down the street. And so, and I was daydreaming out the window, and I saw her, you know, and once you're in the bus in the first lane and somebody's walking on the sidewalk, they're only like 5 feet away from you. And
Right.
I looked at her and I saw her, and then the bus obviously took off and got ahead, and then it slowed down in traffic, and the girl was walking past, right? And it just kept happening like for 5-6 blocks. And it was just this beautiful girl. And I was like, oh my God, I love San Francisco. That's what I was saying to myself, right? So the bus stops right by Amoeba Records at the end of Haight Street, if anybody knows San Francisco. And I get out, and the girl is standing there in front of the concert that I'm playing. And it says sold out. And it just, this magical moment where she walked up, I saw her look up at the sign, and then I got off the bus. And we were like, you know, 5 feet apart. And she looked up and saw the sold out sign. I said, were you walking? Is that where you want? Are you going to that concert? And she said, yeah. I'm supposed to meet people here. It's so fucked. Meaning like she can't get in, right? Yeah. I go, I think I can get you in. And so I got her in, and we hung out, and nothing happened, but I struck up a friendship with her. And I said, if you're ever in LA, you know, look me up. And back then, this is before cell phones, this is in the 80s. I just gave her my home phone number and my address, right? And then by this time, I never answer my home phone, like ever, right? It's just like voicemails beat. For kids that don't know, you used to have a landline, and you had this little box that you got your messages on. And, you know, at a certain point, you're so on drugs, and you're so, you know, hounded by people you don't want to talk to that you never answer it. So there's no way of getting hold of me. So one day, me and my friend JK are sitting in my house, and the girl comes to my house and knocks on my front door. And I was like, oh my God. And I said, oh, it's so great. And I introduced her to my friend. He immediately asks her out because she just moved to LA. They didn't hit it off, but then she met a mutual friend of ours through that guy. She married him. They're still married, and they have 2 kids. One of the kids is a friend of mine that I see, and I go, dude, you only exist. You only exist because I got on this one side of the bus. I love shit like that. Don't you love that?
It's incredibly, it's a romantic way of thinking, for sure. And stuff like that.
Think of your own life. Think of your own life. How you know, it's kind of crazy. Who we are is so random. It's created so randomly.
Right.
Like my grandparents on my dad's side, my grandmother, who I really never met really, but I know the history of, she was born deaf, right? Mm-hmm. And so she was a sign language teacher. My grandfather was deafened in World War II and was in a VA hospital, and she was his sign language teacher. Mm-hmm. So both of my grandparents are deaf. And my natural father grew up in a deaf household, so he signed. And it's crazy. Like they met because the guy got deafened in the war. You don't think of stuff like that?
Oh, that's pure. Again, it's romantic. It's great how these things happen, and we don't really, you know, obviously now, you know, we kind of, or the person doesn't really see how it all came together. But then when you think about it, when you have time to really sit down and think about it, it's just like, wow, if they weren't there at this precise moment, or this situation wasn't happening, I wouldn't be here. And I always try to tell my niece and nephew that whenever my sister and brother-in-law's wedding anniversary comes around. And I tell my parents this all the time too. But I feel like it's important for them to know that if they hadn't gotten together, you wouldn't be here. So you should thank them, you know.
You should be grateful. Yeah. Well, you know, that one of the things about like how my life unfolded being a musician, I was, like I said, a journalism and literature, and I was poetry. I love poetry. I wrote poetry a lot in college and whatever. And it was just by my personality. Like I have a very, you can see, outgoing, kind of talkative, friendly kind of personality. And these friends of mine in college were going to start a band. Those friends are Pete Weiss, the drummer, Chris Hansen, the rhythm guitar player, John Huck, the bass player, and this guy named Bill Stobaugh, who passed away a couple decades ago. They were going to form a band. And none of them are like front people. They're not like personalities, right? And they knew me. Chris knew me. I went to high school with him. So Chris said, well, I know this guy. He's kind of a bit much. And I remember going over, they were in the the school of the college. And I remember Chris saying, you got to come over and meet these guys. And I went over there. And Pete Weiss, the drummer, who's one of my best friends to this day, who basically is the reason why this new Thelonious Monster record was made, why it's so good. He worked so hard at it. He said to me one of the first times I met him, we're going to start a band and you're going to be the singer. That's how bands started.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I would have never thought of being a singer. I was too insecure. I got acne. Like, nobody likes me. Like, no, I'm not going to be a singer. And he believed, you know, because he needed somebody that wasn't scared to go out there. And at this time, Thelonious Monster was kind of modeled after the Germs. Remember this band?
Of course.
The Germs?
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of like a mini Darby Crash. Like, I was a heroin addict. I was an alcoholic. I was a fuck up. I would, you know, I'm the person that would do the craziest stuff at a concert or at a party or whatever. And so he just thought, yeah, that's the type of person we need to be the lead singer of a band. He didn't even ask me if I could sing, which in fact I can, but it didn't matter to him whether I could sing or not. Right? It was just luck that I had been in the glee club and men's choir all my high school growing up. But so I did know how to sing. I do know how to read music, or I did. It kind of went away with smoking crack so much. But he just decided, like, we need a singer. He had a need he needed met. So if anybody's going to be the front person of the band, it's going to be Chris or Bill. And neither one of them, they're both shy, introverted. They couldn't be front people. You couldn't really find a front person. That, you know, we were all going to college. We're all kind of nerdy. We're kind of not cool people to meet cool singers. So you just got the guy that was at school that was, you know, known to be a crazy kind of personality. And that led to my whole life, my whole existence. It'll be on my obituary. I always say it. Lead singer of Thelonious Monster. That's what's like, that only happened because Pete Weiss needed somebody to be the front for his band. Right?
Yeah, and then you were there.
I was the guy. and I can tell you the Chili Peppers the same way. The Chili Peppers were a band without Anthony. Anthony was just their friend roadie kind of guy. And it was called Anthem. And then it became called What Is This, right? It was Hillel Slovak, Alan Johannes, Flea, and Jack Irons, right? And Anthony used to introduce them. Like as like an MC. Remember, bands used to have MCs a lot. The Clash had a guy named Cosmo Vinyl, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of that to the Chili Peppers. Anthony was that to What Is This, that morphed into and became the Chili Peppers when they started thinking like, well, what if we just played Jimi Hendrix songs and Anthony rapped? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Anthony is another power, forceful personality that's a force to be reckoned with. It's just nobody would think like, oh, he's going to be a singer or that. They just thought, well, we could jam Jimi Hendrix type jamming songs. This is Hillel's idea. And Anthony could rap because we all loved Grandmaster Flash. That's this is before NWA, before Eminem. This is the only rap point of view you had were like Sugar Hill Gang, Grandmaster Flash. You know, this is before Run DMC.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the only rappers we really knew were like Houdini. What's his name had that song My Radio? LL Cool J.
Oh yeah.
Grandmaster Flash and Rapper's Delight and Sugar Hill Gang. That was the only rap there was in 1982. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was this cool idea, like maybe we just jam and Anthony rap like Grandmaster Flash, because he did like Grandmaster Flash. He probably won't admit it now, but he loved Grandmaster Flash. Right? Everybody did. The song The Message. You ever heard that song by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five? The Message.
I probably have, but
Something,
yeah, it's
something,
not coming to
something.
my brain.
The Chili Peppers' first four albums sound like it. So
Mm.
something and something in the baseball bat. Like you never heard that record? You got to look it up. It's called
Yeah, I'll look
The
it up.
Message. So and then came this other wave, which was Fishbone and Jane's Addiction, where these people were all so powerful and charismatic, like unbelievable forces to be reckoned with. And it was such a magical time. And it's still the best time of my life, probably from 86 to 89. You know what people do? They always lie. And I don't like lying. Like I like having kids, and I have a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old, and it's fun, and I can do whatever I want and whatever. But it's nothing like when I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment with Anthony and Flea, and we were doing drugs, and we were forming Thelonious Monster and the Chili Peppers, and we met Norwood and from Fishbone, and the Bad Brains guys stayed at our house when they played their first show in LA, and Jane's Addiction formed, and we saw their first gig, and there was nothing like that. And I think often, like I think of that era from like 83 to 87 or something, the way that people feel about their college years. You ever talk to more, older people, like, where'd you go to school? Oh, SC or Notre Dame, and then they talk about that 4 years, and they could be 80 years old, and still you can tell that 4 years of their life was the best 4 years of their life. Well, mine was just in Hollywood, in a 1-bedroom apartment with a couple of friends, and all the people I met and all the things that got started. And think of what got started then. Lollapalooza got started out of that, right? The new wave and what became college radio, and then modern rock, and then Coachella. It all comes from that 4 years and those people that I knew. Pretty magical time.
Right. And, again, it wouldn't happen if you weren't chilling with Anthony and Flea.
The only thing is I think I'm responsible for a lot of the drug use and like some of the, I was a kind of a book nerdy, I was kind of like, I grew up in Palm Springs, so I wasn't around a lot of kids when I was growing up. So I know a lot about music that most people don't know about, like jazz music. My dad was like jazz music, country music. Like I was listening to Hank Williams when I was like 8 years old. So it wasn't some cool hipster novelty to get into country music for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it was a part of me. Like there's a song called Dang Me. Like I think it's Roger Miller. Yeah, I think it's Roger Miller. Dang me, hang me from the highest tree. Woman, won't you wait for me? Boop, 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 doop. That was my favorite song when I was a kid. And apparently my sisters and mom tell me when I was 3 and 4 and 5 years old, I just go around singing that song all the time. Right?
Yeah.
Not that like a foretelling of my depression, I guess.
Yeah.
It's about a guy who's going to hang himself because his woman left him.
No, but it's cute when he sings it. He's 4.
Yeah. And so I knew country music. And for some reason, long before I met Anthony and Flea, I'll tell you where it comes from. So I was 15 years old, and I saw Rufus and Chaka Khan on Midnight Special. Remember that? Have you ever heard of that TV show?
It sounds
it was like this live concert TV show on Friday nights, like at 11:30 to 1 in the morning or something. And Chaka Khan was on there, and I was 15, and she was so beautiful and sexy and crazy, and I became obsessed with her. Like I think it was the first time I fell in love with Chaka Khan, like from one 2-song set on this TV show. And from liking Rufus led to a whole exploration. I'm talking about 15, 16, 17 that ended with, it went into James Brown, and then obviously it went to Funkadelic, and I just became obsessed with black music. This little white kid in Palm Springs, like, you know what I mean? And so by the time I meet Anthony and Flea, I've got every Funkadelic record in my record collection, and they had really heard, Flea had heard some of it, but I was like, oh my God, you gotta get into this. And then when the Fishbone guys came over to my house, Norwood said, you're the first white person I ever met that had all these Funkadelic records and Parliament records. And so, records and music and community and all this stuff, it created all of our lives and all the abundance in all of our lives. And I get sad when, everything's just on your phone. There's something great about, so the first copy of Maggot Brain I got, just the album cover itself is just like crazy. If you think about, I probably got that record in 1976 or something, right? And Maggot Brain, and for those that don't know, it's like this woman's head being about to be buried under the ground. And the song Maggot Brain is just mind-blowing, right? And so I'm 15, 16 years old listening to Maggot Brain in Palm Springs, and it does something to you. It opens up your mind, and you look at the record cover when you're listening to the song over and over again. It's different than just going to your phone and Googling anything or ending up listening to something else. Like I love music to this day, and I'm obsessed with it. And there was this girl that I heard a song by. Her name's Jade Jackson, right? She's like a country Americana folk singer here in LA. Okay. And I just love this one song, and I was trying to find it on my phone. That led to the phone, Amazon music app pushes things to you when you're looking for something that's similar, how the algorithms, and pushes this girl, Nikki Lane, to me. And then I listened to the Nikki Lane girl, and I was like, this is awesome. And but watch this. So that lasted about 3 or 4 hours. I listened to all Nikki Lane songs. I listened to all Jay Jackson songs, and I'm done with it. It's in my phone, and it goes away in the ether. It's not like I have a physical thing I can look at and I can think about and I can read the lyrics of and whatever. It's just another thing in my phone, just like the Biden results, just like you calling me on Zoom, just like the guys at my office emailing me. Everything's in my phone, and it all just is. It's important for that second that you're paying attention to it, and then it just dissolves away. There's something about that. It's not the same as going to a record store and talking to the people who work there and listening to the song they're playing in the record store. And, some of the greatest things in my life happened in record stores. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a huge component of physical media, especially records, just because, especially with vinyl, I feel like it's more involved. You mean I got to get up and change the record? Are you crazy? I'm like, well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so lazy. And then my record player, I have a Newmark here in my office. Yeah. And it doesn't lift up. It just keeps going. Right. And if I go out in another part of the house and I forget, it's just wearing the needle down at the end. And sometimes it's on all night because my office is in this weird part of the house. Right. And I've had to get 2 needles, and then you have to look at the number and go on eBay and order the right needle. But yeah, there's nothing like records. I got records all around me. I got the Thundercat box set. I got Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg, Beautiful Love bootleg. I got Velvet Underground with Andy Warhol. I got the Clash, London Calling. I got the Bicycle Thief, just released on vinyl, my record. I got Confessions of a Pop Group by Style Council, Paul Weller's band. I've got Life in the Book in the Bush of Ghosts by David Byrne and Eno. I've got Kurt Cobain and William Burroughs doing their the 10-inch, The Priest, they called him. And I've got, that's all the records that are on the front of the piles. Now the CDs, let's see what I got here. CDs, I've got Aphex Twin, I've got Diana Ross and the Supremes. I got Leonard Cohen, You Want It Darker. I got Tom Waits' Greatest Hits. I got Rolling Stones, Black and Blue. I got Gil Evans and Jaco Pastorius live in Japan. I've got Kick Out the Jams live by the MC5, and I've got the Grateful Dead's Greatest Hits.
There you go.
That's life. That's all you need, people. You don't need Kim Kardashian. You don't need tennis shoes by fucking Kanye. You don't need this shit. All you need is music and friends. It's all you fucking need.
Yes. No, I completely agree, and that's why I still buy records. CDs, not so much, but records, yes. The last CD I purchased was an Audio Slave album.
Oh wow! I'm sorry.
What? Come on! I love me some Chris Cornell.
Well, I love him. Yeah. But here's the thing about bands that form like that, right? So right. Yeah. I was always a fan about the Drive-In, right? And then they formed Mars Volta. Mars Volta was great. I loved it live.
Right.
But it's just like you didn't finish this other thing. You didn't fucking finish it. And now you get this new thing, and then after a few albums of the new thing, they stop doing that.
Right.
Right. And then Cedric moved to Texas. He must live near you or something. And it's just like this greatest live band I saw at the Drive-In in 2000 or whatever, 99. It was just over before it began, and then the Mars Volta was great and got really great, and then it was over. It's like, no, you're supposed to fucking suffer like the rest of us. Thelonious Monster has been a band. Thelonious Monster has been a band since January or February of 1984.
Yeah.
For 36 fucking years, I've been putting up with these people. Right? And I'm sure they'd say, and they've been putting up with me.
But I also bet you wouldn't have it any other way, right?
No, making this new record was something, because we made a record in 2004 and it was just really kind of opportunistic. Like it wasn't pure and genuine and motivation, right? So all the old bands that we were friends with were all getting back together, right? And some had gone dormant, hadn't broken up necessarily like Butthole Surfers, but they hadn't played in years. Then the Pixies, this band that we used to tour with in the 80s, they got back together at Coachella, and like it was like this biggest deal. And I remember sitting there, and I was with Anthony and Flea, and I was sitting there and I was like, I think I'm going to get Thelonious back together. This is good. Like, what if this happened for Thelonious? So really in 2004, it was kind of not the most altruistic motivation to make a record, and thus the quality of the record is not that good. It was just like, we got to make a record so we can play Coachella and Bonnaroo and fucking have some fun. And the album shows that. I would say there's like 4 good songs on there out of 12 or something. This was different. This was, nobody wanted to do it. Chris, the original guitar player I'm talking about, called me and said, I love the Bicycle Thief, and I don't want to be in Thelonious Monster. I have a bad taste in my mouth about it, because sadly Chris Hansen was the only non-drug addict in Thelonious Monster. Can you imagine what that was like?
Yeah.
He's in a band literally at times with 4 heroin addicts. Like, you talk about not showing up for rehearsal. So I said, well, no, let's talk to Pete, because I see Pete all the time. We work together and other stuff. And I said, Pete, Chris called me and wants to make a record, but like a folk record, like a Bicycle Thief record, like me and him. I don't want to do that. You want to do Thelonious and see if we can write good songs? Not like last time. I said, not like last time.
Yeah.
And because Chris didn't make that record in 2004. The last record he made was Stormy Weather in 88. He's a really great songwriter. He adds a lot. He's a very creative person. He's responsible for a lot of why Thelonious Monster was so like more interesting. Like, his favorite bands are Talking Heads and you know, and Eno and stuff like that, not like mine are Replacements and Bob Dylan. So it all worked together that we all had these different interests. As it started weeding out and becoming more and more of my band, I just got more and more like-minded people like me, like Mike Mart, who's a guitar player who was my friend, and he loves Bob Dylan. And so it becomes more of like a mediocre rock band as I integrate more people that are my friends into it. And it didn't have the creativity that Thelonious Monster had in the first 3 albums, because it was Chris and Bill Stovall and John Huck, these original guys that all eventually just quit because of the drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to be around drugs. Right. And so what remained were the drug addicts and the Bob Dylan fans. And so that can make for some very lazy albums and some really kind of unfocused live shows. Right. So Chris wanting to do it, I knew it could be good if we worked hard. But I knew we couldn't do it unless Pete was all in to do it. And Pete said, I'll get together, and if we can write good songs, then we'll take it to the next step. And I was like, okay. So then we got Martijn, our bass player. He was up for it. He was very apprehensive because he got in the band like in 1990, and we kind of always never I believe like the bass player in the Rolling Stones. You think that guy gets a vote? Daryl Jones. Right. So Martijn, though we love him and he's like a brother, he's like 10 years younger than us, and you really don't have a say.
Right.
And he addressed that right away. He said, I have some songs. I think, Bob, if you're open to it, I'll do it. But if it's going to be like it was or whatever. So everybody was feeling it out. Like, I'll do it, but if it's a fucking drag, I'm out of there, because we're all older. And so we get together, and Dix was the final piece. I had asked him, Pete had asked him, he said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to, because we all have these emotional baggage about it. But there's so much baggage about Thelonious Monster. There's the resentment within the band about the publishing, or about why we weren't successful like James and the Chili Peppers, or who fucked it up, or, all this kind of real uncomfortable bad blood. And then there's disappointment in that. Like, I was disappointed for years. I couldn't understand it. Now I understand it. Like, Anthony and Perry are able to write songs that appeal in a more universal way to people. Like, Anthony's, he can be definitive about the lyrics of a song, but the choruses are usually very, very general and very open to interpretation and very appealing to a large swath of people, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So just for instance, the song Under the Bridge, I wouldn't have used Under the Bridge as a chorus. I think it's, I just know myself. I wouldn't use that as a chorus, but definitely the verses I could have written. But the chorus, I would have been, just more, I always like to use words that nobody uses. Right. And Under the Bridge, how many songs? There's Bridge Over Troubled Water. There's so many bridge songs. I never would have used that word. But the fact that he uses that word is why it's so open to being universally appealing, I think. I really literally would have never used the word bridge. Yeah. I would have gone to a thesaurus and tried to find another word. Right? So I came to grips with why they're successful and we're not. So we get in this room and we start with one of Martijn songs, which is called Buy Another Gun. And he and I both have kids that are the exact same age, went to the same school. They're best buddies for when they were growing up. And of course, when you get older, you kind of, whatever happens.
Life happens.
Yeah, life happens. But he, like me, have had these conversations where, like, when you're dropping your kid off at school, you don't know if you're ever going to see them alive again. That's literally a thought for parents in America.
Right.
And then I remember him making a joke, because our kids were in school together and we'd pick them up together, and he's the one that brought up this thing. That he's Dutch, so he's like, that they have backpacks, bulletproof backpacks for children. And this was like 5 years ago he said that, and I was just like, what? And he goes, yeah, and he showed me, like, you can buy a bulletproof backpack for your kid, right? How fucking sickening is our society? How sick is that?
Yeah.
And so the first song we did was addressing this mutual thing that me and Martijn had, about how frightening it is to have a child in American schools. Right? And then the next song, Dix had a song. We got Dix to come down, and he had this song that was so aggressive and Stooges and Weirdos. He was in the band The Weirdos, punk rock like. And a friend of mine had just died that day before. And I just realized, like, so many of my friends are dead. And I got this idea that, it's not, you just disappear. Eventually, everybody just disappears.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're in my mind, what they look like, but they don't exist anymore. And so I wrote the song about all our dead friends, and that, and that you're supposed to live life knowing that someday you're going to just disappear.
Right.
That you're supposed to seize the day and not be glued to your phone 9 hours a day, looking at nothing, scrolling eBay. It's a fucking waste of time, scrolling, looking at comments of things like, so the idea was, Disappear was the second song. So we got these two great songs. And then Chris came up with the song 16 Angels, which immediately when I heard it, it's kind of haunting and jazzy. And I thought of the homeless problem in Los Angeles and how it's really not a homeless problem. It's more like a mental health and addiction problem, but nobody wants to call it that because that would cost more money to solve. Right. And so there was this guy that lived in my neighborhood who was just, schizophrenic and homeless, and he would go through this cycle of, he'd be crazy and banging on our car hoods and screaming at people and sometimes naked and just fluidly psychotic. And then he'd get arrested, and then he'd get medicated, and then you'd see him, he'd come right back to the same corner right by my house, and he'd be a normal person. And I would talk to him saying, dude, are you okay? You got to keep taking your meds. I know it's a drag and maybe you feel tired, because you hear from schizophrenics a lot that the medicine makes them feel tired or not like themselves. And so I would talk to this guy, and he ended up stabbing the girl from the TV show, the CSI, right? You ever heard of that TV show?
Yeah.
Yeah, the punk rock girl on there, the forensics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she got stabbed by this guy that I had tried to help several times. And so I wrote the song 16 Angels from some of the things he had said to me, and from his perspective of just watching him go crazy at the intersection of Gower and Argyle, of Franklin and Argyle, and Gower and Franklin, right by my house. I would drive past him like 5 times a day. And sometimes when he was, in his better thing, I'd wave or signal to him or give him money or try to get him into a program. But I was always emphasizing, you got to take your meds. You got to take your meds. And he didn't want to take his meds. And he told me one time, when I'm in my right mind, I know how much I fucked up. Right? So if you've been homeless for 5 or 6 years, running around schizophrenic, been arrested 11 or 12 times, been in and out of psych wards, when you're conscious of how you've been living, that's a very painful thing. Yet the social services system doesn't help people with that. They act like they're the miracle cures by giving you fucking Depakote.
Right.
Like, that's not the problem. The problem is his loneliness. The problem is he hadn't seen his mother before he didn't see his mother before she died. The problem is his sister won't talk to him and hasn't seen him in 10 years because she's scared of him. Right? These are the things we need to address with the homeless. But now he's in prison for life for trying to kill somebody. But anyways, I wrote this song from his perspective. And the one thing he said to me that was so powerful one time, I was outside my dry cleaners and I was talking to him, and he was waiting for me to come out of my dry cleaners because I'd always give him $5 or something. And I said, dude, I see you. And, because I was inside the dry cleaners and he was standing by the door wanting me to give him money. And I said, I see you. I'll be, just let me finish, and he's a little agitated, a little aggro, like people with mental illness and homelessness are. And I came out and he goes, you see me, right? And I said, yeah, I see you, dude. I see you. And I hugged him, and he goes, that's what I hate the most, is people just look right through me. That guy said that to me, and it's in the song. People look right through me, like I'm not even here. Yeah. That's what we do to the homeless in Los Angeles. It's so dehumanizing. We think it's compassionate to let people sleep in tents on the streets. It's dehumanizing. Right. And liberals need to think about that. This is compassion, letting schizophrenic people run around the streets living in tents with no medication, fluidly psychotic. This is compassion. This is a liberal democracy. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a
No.
it's a chicken shit way of dealing with a really complicated problem.
Well, and then I feel like we need more people like yourself who are willing to take the time and get to know this individual, get to know, their history, why they're here, things like that, instead of just, kind of generalizing them and just being like, okay, well, let's ship them out, ship them off
Well,
somewhere else.
I've been on and off a bunch of different advisory committees in LA about homeless. And I've
Uh,
been saying it since 2004. It's not a homeless problem. We need to stop calling it something that it's not.
yeah.
Eric Garcetti, I worked with him, the mayor of LA, and I said, Eric, if it was a homeless problem, we just need to build more homes.
Right.
There's a lot
Right.
of homes. Every time I go on Craigslist, I can find a home. The problem is these people don't have the economics nor the emotional stability to do what the rest of us do. So we need to help them.
Right.
And sending them to the mission and listening to a bunch of Jesus shit and not addressing their kind of real issues, the life issues.
Right.
You know, most of the homeless services in Los Angeles, probably in Texas and everywhere, is run by churches and Jesus freaks and stuff.
Right.
And so, accept Jesus. The reason why Alcoholics Anonymous exists is because initially the only way you could become a part of a community that would help you stop drinking was to become a Methodist Christian, right? It was called the Oxford Group. It was an offshoot of the Methodist Church. And Bill Wilson just was like, I can't get with this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fake lie and tell you I'm believing Jesus is keeping me from drinking. So he kind of was trying to find a new way, like all AA really is the Oxford Group without Jesus.
Right.
Which, is not perfect in my opinion, but it's way better than this insistence on religious conversion in order to solve your mental health problems or your drug and alcohol problems. So you have to convert you have to be converted spiritually with religion in order to solve your biomedical problem, which is addiction and mental health. It's crazy. And no one questions it because it's $1 billion racket across the United States. Salvation Army being the most offensive to me. Salvation Army will not take someone who is not medically stable and physically stable and detox from alcohol and drugs. So what the fuck is the point of them?
Right.
If you're not going to help people who are on drugs and you're not going to help people who are having mental health crises, why should we give you fucking money?
Right.
I'm serious. So this idea that most Americans, especially middle class people, have of like, oh, there's places like the Salvation Army. No, there's not. They don't take people with mental illness, untreated mental illness. They don't take people that are actively addicted to drugs and alcohol. They don't take them. They have to go somewhere else. And guess what? There's nowhere else to go.
Right.
Except for the religious missions that just let you spend the night overnight and get a hot meal and convert to Jesus. Right? So that's why we have the mess we have. If you talk to typical addicts on the streets, they don't want to go in because they feel like their freedom is taken away from them. They'd rather sleep on the streets. And I think it's even more than that. It's not only their physical freedom is taken from them, the freedom whether they have sex or whether they drink a beer or whether they snort a line of meth, that physically is taken away from them if you're going to go into the mission for the night, but also their sense of independence and their belief system. They have to convert to this other belief system just to get a free fucking meal and a warm place to sleep for the night.
Right.
That's offensive to me. Right? But that's the way it is.
Right. And, one of the things I've don't really like to get into on the podcast is religion because I'm like, oh, someone's going to get offended. But,
I don't mind offending people.
Right.
Listen. if I'm of the Lenny Bruce philosophy. If Jesus ever does come back, he's never going to stop throwing up when he sees what's been done in his name.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. And
Because I'm a big fan of Jesus. I'm just not a
yeah.
big fan of Christianity.
No, yeah. No, yeah. I, I,
You
if
can edit
somebody,
that out if you want.
oh no, I'm not gonna. I'm just saying, if somebody feels comfort by, believing in a higher power, yeah, sure, go right ahead. But I always think it's weird when people are just, oh, I'm so sick, I need to pray. I'm like, or you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
get help. You can see a doctor. You can no, I'm gonna pray. And that type of person to me is pretty
Well,
dangerous in my opinion.
well, I've seen it evolve in my lifetime where um, it just, evangelicalism rose up and sewed itself hand in glove to the Republican Party in the 80s with the
Right.
moral majority and Jerry Falwell. By the way, what a great father Jerry Falwell was, huh? Great
Yeah.
example to his son, don't you think?
Yeah.
See, I don't measure a person by their accomplishments because a lot of accomplishments are just luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are just luck and right place, right time. You have to work hard, but a lot of my life is just luck,
Yeah.
right? So if you say, oh, he did this or he did that or he helped this person, no, it's just kind of luck. Where I judge what kind of a person the person is by how their children turn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow.
I
Yeah.
tell you, a lot of people aren't doing so good on that scale.
Yep.
Right? Because I can tell you the leading authorities in mental health I've counseled their drug addict kids, like the leading guy, I won't say who it is, but the leading guy, the guy that's probably molded thought about parenting in America more than any one individual in the last 30 years, his son was a drug addict.
Mm.
So if he knows how we should nurture and all this kind of nonsense that we live in, and no one should feel left out and everyone should get a trophy and all this nurture. We've made a whole generation of narcissistic little monsters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who can't accept reality.
Right.
So, and by the way, his kid didn't turn out so good. Right? So I just measure, like, one of my most proud things, like my oldest son, Elijah, who's going to be 34 on the 26th, has never been to rehab.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my greatest accomplishments and one of his greatest accomplishments.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative greatest accomplishment because he grew up in drug houses. He grew up on tour with drugs, and me being high, I would do drugs right in front of him when he was like 6 and 8 years old. It's fucking disgusting how I was as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Somehow I righted the ship somehow. And I was very honest with him once I righted the ship. And I kept telling him, the chances that you're going to end up in an attic, Elijah, are like high, very high.
Yeah.
You have trauma, you have neglect, you have genetic predisposition, you grew up in Hollywood. This is not going to go well if you start taking drugs and drinking. It's not. And, just by being honest about it doesn't mean he didn't drink or take drugs, but he just never got to that point. He knew how to ask for help. He knew that you could get better. He knew that he could talk to my friends about it. He knew, and somehow, I'm so proud of him. He's got a great job and a great life and a great house. And, he's still a crazy millennial that drives me nuts, but I'm so, like, he was texting me at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was so depressed last night.
Yeah.
And he texted me at like 3 in the morning, Wisconsin swinging blue. Like, my phone buzzed and I looked at it and I was like, shut up. Still gonna lose. Right? But that's that love. And there's a song on the album about him and my journey with him. It's called Elijah, his name. And he plays on it. And it's just about being a parent of an adult who's making mistakes and realizing the limits of your ability to influence as a parent. You understand? Like, when he's 24, and I think he's dating a gal that's not the greatest for him, he's not going to listen to me if I say anything. And I'm only probably going to make it worse and make him flee more to her.
Right.
Right. And also when it blows up, like I know it's going to, when he comes to me, I have to have my heart open and my ears open and my mouth shut. Instead of saying, see, I told you so. I knew this was bad. I knew you shouldn't have moved out of state to be with this girl, blah, 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 blah. Like all the parents I counsel do.
Right.
I had to keep my mouth shut and just listen to him cry. And if he asked advice, I would give it.
Yeah.
And one time in this one instance, it was very emotional about 10 years ago. He said, Dad, what should I do? And he was crying in my car. And I just said, well, call her and tell her how you feel and tell her you made a big mistake. And so he did. And the girl told him to fuck off.
Yeah.
And I was like, see, it shows you what I know. and that ability to be equal and vulnerable and not have to have all the answers with your grown adult kid, right? And not have to micromanage your grown adult kid. That's one thing that the parents of the millennials need to just understand, right? Which is like, listen, I love you. I'll help you any way I can. I told them a long time ago, like, I'll help you if it's helping you get autonomous. I don't like maintenance helping. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like, I don't like paying your car insurance, paying your cell phone bill, paying, half your rent. I would rather I'll give you a chunk of money and you have to solve these problems. And then you can never come back to me asking for help with those problems. Mm-hmm. So if you fuck it up and you figure it out and you got to sell your guitars or go borrow money from your friends. And it's worked every time we've done that on the straight up and up. Mm-hmm. Right? Right. Because it is really hard for millennials. Like, go back to me and Anthony and Flea were in our early 20s when we lived together. We had a 1-bedroom apartment, really nice place for $400 a month. Split 3 ways, it was like $133 each. Yeah. Right? At a time when minimum wage was $7 an hour. Yeah. Right? Now minimum wage is $15 an hour, but that apartment is $2,800 a month. I went and looked. I was driving by. It's right off Hollywood Boulevard near Vine. And I was driving by one day and I saw the sign and I just pulled over. There was a parking spot right in front and I went in and I rang the buzzer with the manager. And I said, how much is a 1-bedroom? And he said, $2,800. And I said, oh my God, I used to live here in the early 80s and it was $400. And he laughed. The guy laughed. Yeah. And now you got to understand, that was only 20 years before. Right. In 20 years, the rent had gone up more than 5 times, yet your income hadn't even doubled. Right. So I understand that millennials got a hard road, right? Right. And parents need to help them. We need to help them because we're the ones that made this shitty society that they're trying to make their way in. Right. But help them help themselves, help them get on their own, help them have autonomy. Don't micromanage them. Don't shame them. Just have love and support, but also detached from outcome, right? The outcomes of my son's life are his triumphs or his failures. They're not mine. Yeah. Right. At this point in your early 30s, right? That's different than at 20. Correct. Right. And what's sad is I've been watching the last 10, 15 years, the leading cause of death for millennials is drug overdose. Leading cause of death for white males 36 to 54 is suicide. Leading cause of death for millennials is drug overdose. There is something terribly wrong with our society. And I dare say Donald Trump has very little to do with it. Mm-hmm. I know we all want to attach all our bad feelings and all our anger either at Nancy Pelosi or AOC or Donald Trump, but it's us really. It's us. It's not them. They are the representatives of who we are. Right? Right. And so, I'm optimistic. Sooner or later, all these old people have to die. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That's yes. If there's a silver lining.
Well, Elvis Elvis
Yeah.
Costello has a great song. When it came out, Elvis devotees talking amongst ourselves, Martine, our bass player, is like, that's a little harsh. He has a song called Tramp the Dirt Down about how much he still hates Margaret Thatcher and how he can't wait until she dies so he can go stand over her grave and tramp the dirt down.
Uh-huh.
And this is 10 years after she's retired as prime minister.
Yeah.
But you don't forget how hideous this woman was.
Right.
I did not forget how hideous Ronald Reagan was.
Yeah.
That day, I was like, cheers. And I'm telling you, it's just the truth. And the day some of these horrible monsters, it's just the way of life. And it's going to be me too. And people who don't like me will say, good, cheers to that big mouth fucking idiot liberal.
Good kids, though.
Yeah, good kids.
Good kids. Oh, man. You know, I was very much looking forward to this chat just because as much as I like chatting with musicians that are getting their foot in the door or just discovering themselves, I love chatting with individuals who have lived life and who have regrets, have triumphs, have just life experience in general. And chatting with you has been extremely beneficial and something that I will start bragging about. I truly feel super lucky to have chatted with you, an individual like yourself. And I'm saying this because anytime you want to come back on the podcast, just say so. You have an open invitation. But
oh, thanks so much. Let me tell you my last thing.
Yeah.
One of the greatest, like, you have these moments in life, right? And so I've been a drug counselor since like 2001, really. That's my primary occupation. If you ask me, hey, what do you do? I say, I'm a drug counselor.
Yeah.
But in a past life, I was a musician. And all of my acquaintances and good friends are musicians. I don't have a lot of drug counselor friends. So one of the greatest things that ever happened in my life was about 5 years ago. I got asked to participate in the tribute to Paul Simon at Carnegie Hall in New York City.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
And it's just like an old friend that owns the city winery. And he said, oh, let's get Bob. And that would be good. Because everyone knows I love Paul Simon and songwriters and whatever. So I was kind of scared because I hadn't played music in like 10 years. So I called Gibby, my friend from the Buttholes, and I said, they've asked me to play Carnegie Hall at this Paul Simon thing. You want to do it with me? And my idea was to have the Buttholes like back me, and then I would like do a punk rock version of to just, like, I didn't know what I was just scared shitless of playing Carnegie Hall by myself with an acoustic guitar and sucking. So Gibby goes, yeah, we can do that. And so we were going to do Still Crazy After All These Years. And then it's really kind of a hard song to play.
Yeah.
So then he found this old rockabilly song of Paul Simon. And so we did that. But what I want to say is at the show, it was like me, Gibby, Bob Mould, John Doe, like all my friends from the 80s. And we were all standing there at the sound check. And we all took a picture standing on stage at Carnegie Hall with Carnegie Hall behind us. And it was just like, who the fuck would have thought this was going to happen? Right? It's like, Husker Du and the Butthole Surfers and X and the Thelonious Monster are standing on stage at the Carnegie Hall playing this tribute to Paul Simon. And it's like respected. Yeah. Like we were people that couldn't even find a venue that would let our bands play at.
Yeah, you've come a long way.
Yeah, it was fun.
Nice.
And I remembered all the words.
There we go.
It was so weird that me and Gibby were singing at this thing because we didn't really get dressed up like everybody else. We just wore the clothes that we had that day. But our picture was in the New York Times, and I have it on my wall right here. It was like, fuck, we played Gibby. We played Carnegie Hall.
that must have been amazing. And
It was cool
Paul,
as
Paul
fuck.
Simon. Paul Simon. That's
You don't really know how hard his songs. They're really complicated. They sound
Uh-huh.
simple, but they're really complicated. Still Crazy After All These Years, one of my favorite songs. And I even brought it up making this Thelonious Monster record because at a certain point we had like 10 songs. And I was like, is that enough, guys? And then Josh Klinghoffer, who's executive produced it and played a lot of the instruments on it, I said, Josh, could we do Still Crazy After All These Years? And Pete was like, yeah, do that. Do just you two doing that. And Josh tried to work it out on the piano. And he just goes, it's a really hard song. But when you think of Still Crazy After All These Years, don't you think it's like a really simple song?
Yeah.
It's like, I went it's a really complicated song.
There can only be one person to play it. And, maybe that's by design.
Right. All right. So have a great day. It's great to talk to you.
Great to talk with you. Have a wonderful day. Keep being safe and healthy. And again, just thank you so much for the chat.
Sure. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.